They fed him enough poison to kill 10 men. He smiled and asked for more. It was the winter of 1916 in a St. Petersburg palace cellar. When the poison did nothing, the prince drew a revolver and shot him in the chest. The peasant fell. And then, impossibly, he rose and lunged for his killer's throat. They shot him again. They beat him. They wrapped him in a carpet and threw him into a frozen river. And when they pulled his body from the ice, his hands had come unbound, frozen in the act of clawing his way free. His name was Rasputin. They called him the Mad Monk, the devil who shared the Empress's bed and ruled Russia from the shadows. Almost none of that legend is true, but the truth is far stranger because this one filthy peasant really did help destroy a 300-year empire. To understand how, you have to forget the magic and the murder and start with the one weapon Rasputin truly possessed. Not his body, not his prayers. A secret. He was born a peasant in a poor Siberian village, illiterate, wild, and restless. As a young man, he abandoned his wife and children and became a wanderer, a self-styled holy man drifting across Russia. And along the way, he discovered something about people, that with the right words and those strange, unblinking eyes, he could make them believe almost anything. He preached a doctrine that was as seductive as it was scandalous, that the only path to true forgiveness was through sin, that you had to fall deeply and shamefully before God could lift you back up. It was a doctrine that conveniently allowed him to drink, to indulge, and above all, to seduce. He told the women who followed him that the touch of a holy man could purify them, and astonishingly, many believed it. By the time he reached the capital, St. Petersburg, bored aristocratic women were whispering about the filthy magnetic peasant who spoke like a saint and behaved like a sinner. That reputation carried him upward, salon by salon, closer and closer to the most powerful and most desperate woman in the entire empire, the Empress of Russia, a woman hiding the secret that would become his real weapon. Her name was Alexandra, and she was hiding a secret so dangerous that it could shatter the throne itself. Her only son, Alexei, the heir to all of Russia, had hemophilia. His blood could not clot. A single bruise, a small fall, could bleed for days and kill him. A sick and dying heir meant a weak and dying dynasty. So the illness was buried as one of the most tightly guarded secrets in the world. To the public, the future Tsar was perfectly healthy. The truth was, he could die at any moment. The finest doctors in Europe were powerless, and a powerless mother will turn to anyone who offers hope. So when she heard of a holy man who could work miracles, the Empress sent for the peasant. And then something happened that no one has ever fully explained. Again and again, when the boy was bleeding and the doctors had given up, Rasputin would sit beside him, speak softly, and the bleeding would stop. Maybe it was calm. Maybe it was that he kept the frantic doctors and their useless medicines away. It did not matter. To Alexandra, it was a miracle from God. And the man who could save her son could do no wrong. From that moment, Rasputin had something no army and no fortune could buy. The total, unbreakable trust of the woman who ruled beside the Tsar. He was untouchable. But here was the trap. The people could not be told why. The heir's illness was still a secret. So no one outside the palace understood why a filthy, womanizing peasant now had the run of the royal household day and night. And into that silence, the rumors poured. If they could not know the truth, they would invent one. And the one they invented was the filthiest they could imagine. They said the peasant was the Empress's lover, that he shared her bed while the Tsar was away. Crude cartoons spread through the city showing exactly that, and all of Russia began to believe its royal family was rotten to the core. None of it was true. Rasputin almost certainly never touched the Empress. But it did not matter anymore, because in the eyes of the people, the perception was the reality, and the throne was rotting in public. Then, in 1914, the war came. Russia marched into the First World War, and it went catastrophically wrong. Millions of soldiers died in the mud, and the people grew hungry and furious. And then the Tsar made the most fatal decision of his life. He left the capital to personally command his failing army at the front, and he left the government of all Russia in the hands of his wife. And of the peasant she trusted above all others. Now the rumors looked like the truth. With the Tsar gone, ministers were hired and fired at dizzying speed, 3 prime ministers in just 16 months, and the whole country believed the orders were coming from one mad, scheming peasant. Whether he truly ran the government or only seemed to no longer mattered, the empire was visibly in the hands of the woman he had bewitched, and the monarchy had become a national humiliation. To the noble families who had served the throne for centuries, there was only one solution left. To save the monarchy, the peasant had to die, and a young prince named Felix Yusupov decided he would be the one to do it. On a freezing night in December 1916, they lured Rasputin to the Yusupov palace with the promise of wine, music, and beautiful company. He came willingly. He always did. And what happened in that cellar became the most famous murder of the 20th century. The poison, the bullets, the frozen river, the man who would not die. Except almost none of it happened the way the world believes. The whole blood-soaked legend was a lie, invented years later by the very man who killed him. The autopsy told a far simpler, colder truth. There was no poison in his body, only wine. There was no water in his lungs, which meant he was dead before he ever hit the river. The fatal wound was a single shot, fired point-blank into his forehead. And some historians believe that bullet came not from a Russian noble at all, but from the gun of a British secret agent desperate to keep Russia fighting in the war. The unkillable monster, the man who survived poison and bullets, was a myth, sold by a killer who needed his crime to sound like the slaying of a demon, and who, years later, needed the money the story would bring. But here is the final brutal irony. They killed the peasant to save the monarchy, and it changed nothing at all. The rot he had come to symbolize was already too deep. Just 10 weeks after Rasputin died, revolution swept through Russia. The Tsar was forced from his throne, and a year later, in a cramped cellar room, the Tsar, the Empress, the boy whose secret illness had started it all, and his 4 sisters, were shot to death. The 300-year Romanov dynasty was gone forever. Rasputin's real power was never magic. It was never even the seduction the whole world remembers him for. It was a secret. A mother hid her son's illness, and to protect that secret, she hid the truth about the peasant she trusted. And into that silence, the lies grew, until they were far deadlier than any poison. The empire was not destroyed by a mad monk. It was destroyed by the one thing it could never let anyone see. If this is the kind of history they never taught you, subscribe. There are other men who whispered in the ears of kings, and other secrets that brought empires crashing down.